The Hound cursed at the sky as another sheet of cold rain swept across the road, turning the hard-packed earth into clinging mud that sucked at his boots. The horse snorted and tossed its head, ears flattening against the downpour. But Sandor Clegane only tightened his grip on the reins and kept walking, shoulders hunched beneath a sodden cloak that did little to keep him dry. 7 hells, he muttered, spitting rainwater. If the stranger had any sense, he'd drag every bloody river lord down with him and be done. Arya Stark rode behind his lumbering stride, perched awkwardly on the horse's back with her thin arms looped around a half-empty sack of stolen bread and onions. There was little comfort in the half-rotten fare. Her belly gnawed at her spine, and every jolt of the horse's gait sent a small jolt of pain up through her thighs, but she did not complain. Complaining only earned a growl or a cuff, and she had learned that the quickest way to get where she wanted to go was in silence. Only she was no longer sure where she wanted to go. They had turned toward the river days ago, the Hound talking of the twins and ransom, of her mother and brother and all their pretty banners. "More gold than you're worth, little wolf," he had said, eyeing her with that burned half-face that made men flinch. "If they still live." The word had been a cold stone lodged somewhere below her ribs ever since. Now, as the road dipped toward a low crossing camp where fires guttered in the rain and lines of men moved like shadows against the muddy banks, she felt that stone shift and grind. Banners flapped on the far side of the river, pale cloth smeared with something darker by the rain. In the gloomy light, she could just make out the twin towers, stitched in gray and blue. Frey. Mother had said the name with tight lips once, when she thought Arya was not listening. The smell of wet wool, horse piss, and wood smoke thickened as they drew nearer. Men's voices rolled across the road in a low tide of curses and laughter, punctuated by the occasional clatter of metal and a shrill whinny. The Hound slowed, his dark eyes sweeping the camp. His burned cheek shone slick in the rain, scar ridges catching the light from the nearest brazier. "We go careful," he said. "Frey men are as likely to rob you as greet you. Keep your mouth shut." She nodded, chin ducked beneath her hood. Her fingers brushed the hilt of needle, hidden beneath her cloak. The familiar feel of the thin blade steadied her for a heartbeat, like Jon's hand on her shoulder long ago. A line of men in mismatched mail blocked the road ahead, spears planted in the mud. One of them stepped forward, his face a bony wedge beneath a wet mop of thinning hair, a badge of the twin towers sewn crookedly on his breast. "What business?" he barked. "Lord Walder's crossings are not for every hedge knight and his whelp." The Hound's lip curled. "I'm no hedge knight." The man squinted through the rain, then went a touch paler. "Clegane," he muttered. "You're supposed to be dead." "Not yet," Sandor growled. "But keep yapping and I might see to you before I go to ground. I want a fire, dry clothes, and a drink that doesn't taste like horse piss. And I want word sent to the young wolf's people. I've got one of his litter he'll want back." Arya's heart stuttered. The word still made her bones feel strange. Young wolf, they called Robb that now, but she kept her face down. If the Frey guard looked too closely, if he saw the stark features beneath the grime and tangle, everything could twist. "King Robb's not here," the man said. "He's south with his host, near the crossroads. The wedding's near, and he's late enough as is." "Wedding?" The stone in Arya's chest dropped another inch. "What wedding?" she asked, before she could swallow the words. The guard's gaze flicked to her and narrowed. "The king in the north's uncle to one of Lord Walder's girls." "Where have you been, girl? A cave?" The Hound shot her a warning look. "She's witless," he said, took a blow to the head. "For the last time, let us through." The spearman hesitated, then stepped aside, though his eyes lingered too long on Arya. As they passed into the maze of tents and makeshift lean-tos, the Hound's hand closed briefly around her ankle where it rested against the horse's flank. "Don't speak again unless I tell you," he muttered. "King's not here. We find food and a dry corner. Then we ride on." Arya barely heard him. Wedding. King Robb. Uncle Edmure. The river road twisted and shifted around her, turning into a corridor of looming canvas and dripping lines. but her thoughts had run ahead to a great hall filled with music and food, her mother's tight smile, her brother's grave young face. She slid from the horse as Sandor led it toward a rough paddock, boots squelching in the churned ground. Men passed them, shoulders hunched against the weather, some glancing suspiciously at the Hound, others too drunk or weary to care. The stink had a different taste here. Anticipation beneath the damp, something sharp and sour. She knew that smell. It was the way the air tasted before needle-kissed flesh. They found space near the edge of the camp where the ground rose half a hand above the worst of the mire. Sandor tethered the horse to a twisted sapling and set about coaxing a small fire from damp kindling with a grim patience Arya might once have admired. Tonight, she could not keep still long enough to watch. She paced, kicking at tufts of dead grass, hugging herself against the rain's chill claws. The word wedding clung to her thoughts like burrs. She had never seen Robb wed. In the hazy pictures she had painted for herself while shivering in ditches and barns, she had imagined a grand hall in Winterfell, Jon at her side, Robb smiling down at some faceless, kind-eyed northern girl while father watched from the high seat. That hall was ashes now. Her father was bones in a box or rotting in some stranger's ditch. The girl would be a Frey, pox-marked and sharp-eyed, if the songs the men sang on the road were to be believed. "Stop fidgeting," Sandor said without looking up. His big hands sheltered a spark, coaxing it with his breath. "You're putting me off." "I am cold," Arya lied. "And hungry. You were hungry yesterday and the day before. You'll be hungry when you're dead." He snapped a twig, fed it into the meager flame. "Sit. I'll see what I can steal from these piss drinkers. Freys always keep more for themselves than they give their guests." When he stalked off into the rain, cloak swirling, she waited only long enough to make sure he did not look back. Then she slipped behind the neighboring tents and moved deeper into the camp, feet silent in the mud. She had been a mouse in Harrenhal, a ghost in the dark fungus corridors, and the skill had never left her. The worse the weather, the less men watched their shadows. She ducked past a pile of barrels and found herself near the heart of the camp, where the smoke of larger fires smeared the air. A group of men huddled close around one such blaze, their armor neglected, helms hanging from spear butts, cloaks steaming in the heat. Their mugs sloshed as they laughed, the sound thick with drink. Arya edged closer, keeping a ramshackle lean-to between herself and the circle. Through a gap in the sagging canvas, she caught flashes of faces. A soldier with a nose broken so often it had flattened across his cheeks. Another with a gap where his front teeth should be. One perched on a barrel with boots far too fine for a common man. "Telling you it'll be worth the wait," the booted one said, words slurred but oddly precise. Lord Walder's never been one to miss a chance for a jest. And this jest, boys, this jest will echo from Dorne to the wall. "Long as the wine flows," a gap-toothed man replied, raising his cup. "I don't care if the wolf pups dance or drown, so long's my belly's full." "They won't be dancing," the first man said, leaning forward, his voice dropping. "Not for long. You think all these crossbows are for decoration?" There was a low murmur. Arya's pulse thudded. She pressed closer, rain dripping from the tent's lip onto the back of her neck. "What crossbows?" another voice asked. The man gestured broadly with his mug toward the shadowed outline of the towers. "Up on the walls. Under the feasting platform. Behind the bloody banners, if you believe half the whispers." He chuckled, an ugly sound. "Lord Tywin likes his songs with a sharp end. And Lord Walder will play the music." "These are Frey lands, you fool," someone else scoffed. "You use a blade on guest right, you bring the gods' curse down on your head." "The gods have been sleeping a long time," the first man said. "And there's no curse that gold from Casterly Rock can't sweeten." "Tywin." The name sliced through the rain. Arya's hand tightened on Needle's hilt until her knuckles ached. "And the Wolf King?" a quieter voice asked. "You're saying this is for him?" "For him and every northern fool who follows," the booted man said, and his smile glittered in the firelight like broken glass. "When the singers take this tale south, they'll call it the Red Wedding or some such. I'd wager it already has a name in the high halls. Arya's lungs refused to work for a heartbeat. Red wedding, crossbows behind banners, music and knives. The picture unfolded in her mind with horrible clarity. A hall like the one at Winterfell but colder, a long table, the clang of cups, and then a song no one expected, strings plucked as bowstrings, her brother toppling with a quarrel in his chest. She did not know that it would be exactly so, but she had seen enough war to know the shape of slaughter when men laughed about it. She shifted, her knee bumping the sagging canvas. For a moment, the men's laughter faltered. "You hear something?" one asked, half rising. Arya slid backward into the rain, heart beating a spear's rhythm. She ducked behind a stack of crates, then another, until the voices were muffled. The camp spun around her. She did not feel the cold anymore, only a rising heat beneath her skin. Robb, mother, they were riding into this. She thought of the Hound, of his promise to sell her back. She almost turned toward their little fire. Instead, her feet pointed the other way, toward the line of tethered horses and the dark ribbon of the road beyond. The horse did not like her at first. It tossed its head and rolled its eyes, hooves clattering as she led it away from the paddock with a stolen halter and a handful of moldy oats taken from a split sack. Men shouted in the distance, laughing, arguing, busy with their own concerns in the restless dark. No one watched the skinny girl leading a dun gelding toward the shadows. "Easy," Arya whispered, keeping her voice low and steady, the way she had heard real horsemen do. "I won't hurt you. We're just gonna ride a little, away from here, away from songs and crossbows." The horse snorted hot breath over her cheek. Its eyes were rimmed with white, but it did not balk when she swung herself up onto its back in one smooth, practiced motion. Yoren's grim lessons came back to her in the stretch of her legs, the grip of her knees. The gelding shifted under her, testing, then stilled. She stole one last glance toward the rough patch where Sandor had made their fire. The embers glowed dull red beneath a crust of ash, but he was nowhere in sight. Perhaps he was still bartering for meat or wine. Perhaps he had found a fight. He would be furious when he returned to an empty clearing. He might even come after her. But Arya Stark had wasted enough of her short life being dragged in directions she did not choose. "Hiya," she said, and dug her heels in. The horse leapt forward onto the road, hooves striking sparks against buried stone. The camp fell away behind her, a tangle of dim shapes and murmured voices swallowed by the rain and the steady drumming of hooves. The night opened ahead, vast and wet and cold. She rode with her body low over the horse's neck, fingers tangled in its coarse mane, eyes narrowed against the sting of water. The road was a slick ribbon, easy to lose in the pools of shadow between scattered torch posts, but there were wagon ruts to follow and the faint, trampled suggestion of thousands of boots. Robb's army had passed this way. She could feel it in the churned mud, the broken branches, the lingering smell of smoke and horse. Somewhere ahead, beyond the reach of the Freys and their laughing plots, her brother's banners still flew. The miles blurred. Trees loomed and fell away, their leafless branches clawing at the sky. Once, a fox crossed the road ahead, a flash of pale fur and bright eyes, and for an instant Arya saw Nymeria running beside her in the dark, massive and gray, matching the horse stride for stride. She blinked and the vision was gone, leaving only rain and breath and the ache in her thighs. Her mind replayed the overheard words with a stubborn, furious clarity. Red wedding, music, crossbows, Tywin. She knew Lord Tywin's name all too well. Men in the Riverlands spat it like a curse, and the charred shells of burned villages sang a silent chorus. Could it be a drunken boast? Men lied when they drank. They inflated their stories like innkeepers' prices. But the way the booted man had smiled, the glint in his eyes as he spoke of songs with sharp ends. Arya had watched a boy's throat opened on a block in King's Landing while the crowd screamed and jostled. She had seen knights in gleaming armor laugh as they clubbed prisoners in Harrenhal. She knew the sound of a man who took pleasure in cruelty. She would not gamble her mother and brother's lives on the chance that it was only talk. The clouds thinned toward midnight, the rain slackening to a half-hearted drizzle. A wan moon peered through tattered shreds of cloud, painting the road in pale silver and shadow. Her stolen horse's flanks heaved, foam flecking its neck, but when she eased off the pace for a while it jogged unwillingly, as if it too sensed the urgency. "Just a bit more," she murmured. "He can't be far. This is his road. His war. He has to be close." She imagined cresting a hill to see Robb's army spread before her. Thousands of men in gray and blue and sunburst orange, mailed and ready, banners snapping in the wind. She imagined riding straight through them to find her brother, dismounting and tugging his sleeve like she had when she was small. "They'll kill you if you go," she thought, hearing Sansa's caution in her head, or Mother's. "You don't know their plans, Arya. You're only guessing." But some part of her, the hard, sharp part that had survived alleys and cellars and the nightmare of Harrenhal, whispered back, "You know enough." The first gray smear of dawn was just beginning to soften the eastern sky when she saw it. A scrap of gray cloth at the side of the road, half buried in mud. She reined in, heart thumping, and slid from the saddle to snatch it up. A dire wolf, stitched in fading white upon the gray, torn from a larger banner. Her throat tightened. She pressed the cloth to her lips, tasting dirt and old rain, then swung back onto the horse and kicked it into a trot, then a canter. Pale smoke smudged the sky ahead now, and beneath it, faint but growing, came the sound of many men waking to another day of war. They saw her before she saw them. One moment the road ahead was empty save for ruts and puddles and the ghost of wagon tracks. The next, a shape detached itself from the low rise to her right, a rider in a dark cloak and dented helm, horse picking its way down the slope at a measured pace. "Ho there!" he called, raising a hand. "Hold fast." Arya's fingers twitched toward needle. Then more riders appeared, cresting the rise, their silhouettes bristling with spears. Banners stirred sluggishly behind them, stiff with damp, but she recognized the shapes even before the wind tugged them fully open. The dire wolf of House Stark, the leaping trout of House Tully. Her heart lurched against her ribs. "Robb!" she whispered. The first rider approached, his horse blowing steam in the chill dawn air. He was older than she'd expected, with a beard gone mostly to gray and a thin scar across his right cheek. His eyes, when they narrowed at her, were a steely blue she could imagine being kind in another moment. "You ride hard for a camp you do not know," he said. "Who are you, girl, and whose horse is that?" She swallowed, throat raw from night air. "I need to see King Robb," she said. "Now. It's important." The men around him snorted. One spat into the mud. "Every peasant brat has important news these days," someone muttered. Last one swore dragons had landed in the Trident. The leader's gaze did not soften. "Names," he said. "Yours first." Names had been a dangerous thing these last long years. In King's Landing, in Harrenhal, she had kept her own close as a dagger, taking new ones as needed and discarding them when they grew sharp enough to cut. But here, looking at the faded gray of her father's banner, at the men who had marched for him and for her brother, the lie stuck in her throat. "Arya," she said. "Arya Stark." She thought they wouldn't believe her. She thought they would laugh or sneer, or drag her off as a mad child. Instead, the silence that followed had a different weight. One of the riders made a startled sound, half oath, half prayer. Another muttered something about wolves and omens. The leader stared at her as if she had opened her chest to show him a beating heart. "Say that again," he said quietly. "I'm Arya Stark of Winterfell." The words came easier the second time, fierce and defiant. "Daughter of Lord Eddard and Lady Catelyn, sister to King Robb. Take me to him, or I swear by the old gods I'll find him myself." He swung down from his saddle with more speed than she would have credited to a man his age. Mud splashed up his boots as he stepped closer, eyes raking her face. She stood her ground. There was dirt on her cheeks, old bruises yellowing along her jaw, hair hacked short and ragged by her own hand. But beneath all that she was still her father's daughter. "You've his look," the man murmured almost to himself. 7 above. I am Hallis Mollen, once of Winterfell's guard. His voice thickened around the word.
If this is girl.
It's not. Her fingers tightened on the sodden scrap of banner in her belt. She tugged it free and shoved it at him. I found this on the road. And I know that when you drill, you make the green boys stand with the practice spears till their hands bleed. And you shout the whole time that they're gripping them like they're maidens. Maidens. And you smell like boiled leather in the winter, and my father trusted you with his children. The corner of his mouth twitched upward, then flattened. By the gods, you are Arya. He let out a long breath, fogging the air. Mount up. We ride for the king. Turned out she didn't need to. One of the younger riders, freckled, red-haired, eyes gone wide as coins, swung down and offered her his saddle without being asked. She scrambled up while Hallis barked orders, sending 2 outriders ahead with the speed of a lifetime drilled under a lord's commands. As they rode into the heart of the camp, men turned to stare. They were everywhere. Tending cook fires, mending straps, checking spearheads, rubbing sore horses down with handfuls of straw. Stark and Tully colors rippled limply over them all. A woman with a babe at her breast paused to scowl at the sudden commotion. A flock of chickens scattered underfoot. Arya sat very straight, jaw clenched, refusing to look cowed. Let them see her. She was not a ghost slipping through cracks anymore. She was Arya Stark, come to save her pack. The scent hit her before the sight did. Wet fur and meat and the iron tang of blood. Gray wind padded between 2 tents, hackles high, eyes half-lidded in a wolf's lazy disdain that did not quite hide a killing edge. He was larger than she remembered from when he had been a gangly pup tumbling in Winterfell's yard, almost as big as Nymeria in her dreams. He halted in their path, amber gaze fixing on her. The horse shied. The boy riding behind her nearly fell, grabbing for the saddle strap. Hallis flung out an arm, signaling the column to halt. For a heartbeat, all sounds seemed to drop away. Arya could hear only her own breath and the soft, rumbling growl building in the direwolf's chest. "It's me," she whispered. "It's Arya." She did not know if wolves remembered names, but something in Grey Wind's eyes shifted. He sniffed the air, head tilting, then stepped closer, paw prints sinking deep into the mud. His muzzle rose until it was a hand's breadth from her knee, fetid breath washing over her. Arya held still. If he tore her open, at least she would die under her brother's banner. Instead, the dire wolf snorted and gave her knee a rough, almost playful shove with his nose. The force of it nearly unseated her. A low, please sound escaped him, somewhere between a huff and a whine. Behind him, a tent flap snapped open. Robb Stark filled the doorway like a shadow before the dawn. He had grown since she'd last seen him, broader through the shoulders, his face thinned by war and worry, but the curl of his hair and the gray of his eyes were the same. For a heartbeat he stood very still, drinking in the sight of the halted riders, the familiar direwolf, the skinny girl perched atop a borrowed horse. "Arya?" he said, and there was something raw and disbelieving in his voice that unstrung her spine. She tried to climb down with the same agile grace she'd always had, but her legs decided that was the moment to remember they had been wrapped around a horse for half the night. She half slid, half fell, landing in the mud with a startled grunt. It splashed up her front in a cold embrace. Then her brother was there, boots sinking into the muck as he crossed the distance in 3 long strides. His hands closed on her shoulders, strong and careful, as if he feared she would crumble at his touch. "Arya," he said again. Up close, she could see the lines carved beside his mouth, the faint shadow of a beard. He smelled of wool and steel and dog. "By the gods, Hallis, is this?" "It's her, your grace," Hallis Mollen said, dismounting. His voice had gone softer. "On my honor." Robb searched her face as if he might still find some trick there. A borrowed name, a fosterling's lie. Arya met his gaze without flinching, though her throat had tightened so hard it was difficult to breathe. "You look stupid with that hair," she managed. His laugh broke something in him. It came out strangled, half sob, half chuckle. And then he was pulling her against his chest with a force that knocked the air from her lungs. She clung back, fingers twisting in the rough fabric of his cloak, pressing her face into him like she had not done since she was small enough to be carried on his hip. "You're alive," he whispered into her tangled hair. They told me you were taken with father, that you'd been lost. Mother Will, is she here?" Arya pushed back enough to search his face. "Is she? She's inside," he said. "We were to ride for the twins on the morrow. For," his mouth tightened, "for a wedding. Come." He kept one hand on her shoulder as if afraid she might vanish if he let go. The tent was warmer than the air outside, thick with the smell of canvas and wax and damp wool. A rough-hewn table dominated the center, scarred and pitted, bearing maps held in place by daggers and carved stone markers. A woman sat at that table, hands wrapped around a cup of cooling tea. Catelyn Stark looked up with a frown already gathering on her brow, the expression Arya remembered from 1,000 small scoldings. For a heartbeat, she did not seem to truly see the girl her son was leading in. Then something in her face went slack, tea sloshing from the cup as her fingers spasmed. "Arya," her voice was a breath, incredulous. No, it can't." Robb stepped aside. Arya stood alone in the lamplight, suddenly conscious of the dirt on her face, the stains on her tunic, the way her boots squelched faintly on the tense rugs. "It's me," she said, and her voice broke on the last word. Her mother rose so quickly the stool toppled behind her. Catelyn's hands flew to her mouth, then reached out as if of their own accord, fingertips trembling. When they met Arya's cheek, she sucked in a great, shuddering breath. "You're so thin," she murmured. "And your hair, what have you?" The rest dissolved into a sob as she pulled Arya into her arms, clutching her with the desperate strength of one who has lost too much. For a while there were no words, only breathing and the quiet sounds of grief uncoiling. Arya found her face damp, though she could not say when the tears had started. She had forgotten how her mother's embrace felt, like being wrapped in a cloak that smelled of soap and ink and Winterfell's clean air. Gray wind nosed his way under the tent flap, huffing as he settled at Robb's side with a grunt. The king in the north sank onto the nearest stool, scrubbing a hand over his face, a rueful smile tugging at his mouth even as his eyes shone. "When Hallis brought word," he said, voice roughening, "I thought it some cruel jest. The Freys have a peculiar sense of humor. I was ready to have someone whipped." "It's no jest," Arya said, pulling back from her mother's embrace. Her knees still wanted to tremble, but she locked them stiff with stubbornness. "Robb, there's something you need to hear. Both of you." Catelyn wiped at her cheeks with the heel of her hand, forcing herself back to composure with visible effort. "You've only just arrived," she said. "You must be exhausted, hungry. We can have food brought." "There isn't time," Arya cut in. "Not if you mean to go to the twins." The words came faster now, urgency lending them edge. "I was there, at Lord Walder's camp by the crossings. I heard men talking by the fire. They spoke of music and crossbows, of Tywin Lannister, of a jest that would echo from Dorne to the wall. They called it a red wedding." The air in the tent changed. The small sounds, wax dripping, canvas whispering in the wind, seemed suddenly much louder. Robb's shoulders went very still. Catelyn's hand tightened on the back of a chair until her knuckles whitened. "Tell me exactly what you heard," Catelyn said carefully, "from the first word to the last. Leave nothing out, no matter how small it seems." So Arya did. By the time she finished, other faces had gathered in the tent. They came in ones and twos at first, men Arya vaguely recognized from Winterfell's Great Hall, their names floating at the edge of memory. Karstark and Umber and Glover and a half-dozen more. Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, slipped in behind them with a Riverlord's wary grace, his sharp eyes taking in Arya, the maps, his niece's drawn face in a heartbeat. Robb's voice had carried beyond the canvas when he sent Hallis to fetch his principal lords. "I want no rumors," he had said. "They hear it from her, or they hear nothing." Now they stood around the map table in a tight half-circle, damp cloaks darkening the rugs, faces grim in the lamplight. Arya repeated her tale a second time, then a third, each retelling stripping away some of the shaking from her hands. Names, phrases, the sly curl of the booted man's mouth. She laid them all out like cards in a game Ser Roderick had once tried to teach her. Crossbows behind banners. The great John Umber growled when she finished. His shaggy beard dripped on his breastplate. Hidden on the walls, songs with sharp ends. "It stinks of Lannister work to me. As the girl says, they named Lord Tywin," another man pointed out. His cloak bore the mailed fist of House Glover. "Though drunks speak of kings and lions more than they do of their own mothers. Drunks also speak truth when they think no one listening," Blackfish Brynden said. His eyes had not left Arya's face the entire time he spoke, as if weighing every word. Now he leaned over the map, tapping a finger against the stylized drawing of the twins. "Walder Frey is capable of treachery. We all know it. But this," his mouth twisted, "this is something else. Guest right is old as the first men. Even Walder might hesitate at such a curse." "If the Lannisters promise him enough," Catelyn murmured. "And if he thinks you have already broken faith with him, Robb. You swore to wed one of his daughters, and instead you took Jane to wife." Robb flinched at the name. Arya filed it away, another piece of a puzzle she barely understood. His wife, Jane. Not now. He braced his hands on the table, knuckles pressing into the parchment. Even if Walder Frey feels slighted, he would not dare. To murder a king under his roof, with the eyes of gods and men on him. He would if he felt certain Lord Tywin would shield him from the consequences, Brynden said. "If he believed the realm would call you traitor and clap when you fell." The murmur that answered him was low and ugly. Arya saw in their faces the raw edges of long marches, dead sons, burned keeps. There was so much hurt here already that the thought of one more betrayal seemed almost unsurprising. "You think it's true then?" a younger lord asked. "You think they mean to slaughter us at this wedding?" "I think," Robb said slowly, lifting his gaze from the map to his sister, "that I would be a fool to dismiss a warning carried to me by blood. My father died trusting too much in honor." His mouth tightened. "I won't make the same mistake." The Blackfish inclined his head, satisfied. "Then we proceed as if the threat is real and look for proof to match it. If it's a ghost, we lose nothing by being cautious. If it's not," he traced the twin towers with his fingertip, "we may yet turn the song around on them." Arya let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. They believed her. Not all of them. She could see that in the doubt pinching some mouths, the narrowed eyes. But enough. Enough that her words would not be tossed aside like so much small folk gossip. "What would you have us do, your grace?" the great John asked, folding his massive arms. "Break the pact and march away?" "If we turn from the twins entirely, we cede the crossing," Robb said. "Without it, we're trapped between the Lannisters and the river. No, we go, but not blindly." He straightened. Some of the boy she remembered burning away in the heat of his resolve. "Uncle Brynden, I want eyes on the towers before we enter. Quietly. Men who can count the slits in the walls without being seen themselves. If there are more crossbows on those battlements than there ought to be, I want to know. If Frey men drill at odd hours, I want to know. If the kitchens order more salt than can be eaten by 100 men over a week, I want to know." Brynden's mouth quirked. "More salt. To clean blood from stone," Robb said, and something in his voice made Arya's skin prickle. "You have your scouts," the Blackfish said. "I'll take half a dozen men I trust and have them sniff around while we're still a day's ride away. Walder has always loved a guest who arrives a little early. It gives him more time to make them uncomfortable." Laughter flickered, brief and humorless, then died. "And you, Arya," Robb said, turning to her. "You've risked much to bring us this. I would keep you here behind our lines. Safe, safe. The word sounded strange to her ears. Harrenhal had been safe, in the way a spider's lair was safe for the flies caught in its web. I'm not going back to hiding, she said. At the twins, you'll need eyes where yours can't be. I can go places gray wind can't follow. I can listen where men won't notice a scrawny girl. I got this far without anyone stopping me. Don't you dare shut me up in some wagon now. Catelyn made a soft sound of protest. Arya, she's not wrong, Brynden said mildly. Walder's halls are full of spaces where men duck their heads to whisper secrets they think no one hears. Our girl here has a talent for inconvenient truths. Robb's jaw worked. You would risk her? He demanded. Brynden's gaze didn't waver. I would risk much to thwart whatever serpent's song the Lannisters have been teaching Freys. But I'd not force her. She's no child in swaddling, Robb. The scars on her tell their own tale. Arya met her brother's eyes, willing him to see her as she was, not as the little girl who used to chase cats through Winterfell's cellars. Let me help, she whispered. I don't want to lose you. Not you, not mother. Not after all this. His shoulders sagged for the briefest moment, then squared again. Very well, he said, but you don't go anywhere alone. You move under my orders, Uncle Brynden's or Mother's. If we say run, you run. If we say hide, you hide. Swear it. She hated the feel of the word on her tongue, but she made herself say it. I swear. The Riverlands had many faces. Arya had seen a good number of them by now. The scorched, blackened ribs of villages the Lannisters had torched. The raw stumps of trees felled for siege works. The gentle green where farmers had coaxed the earth back to life in the wake of armies. From the ridge where Brynden Tully reigned in his mount, the land wore a colder mask. Mist clung to the river like old cobwebs, looping between the stone legs of the twins. The towers themselves rose stark against the dimming sky, brick stacks of age and resentment, twice joined and twice sundered. Torches pricked their walls in little clusters of dull orange, like fireflies trapped behind stone. Arya kept close to the Blackfish's stirrup, her own smaller horse stamping impatiently at the chill wind. She had not been meant to come this far ahead, Catelyn had argued, and Robb had scowled. But in the end, her stubbornness and Brynden's quiet support had won. It was one thing to promise her a part to play, and another to leave her sitting in camp while others risked their necks on the proof of her words. Count them, Brynden said softly, eyes never leaving the towers. Start with the western gatehouse, slits above the portcullis. Tell me what you see. She squinted, letting her breath slow, her world narrowing to the geometry of stone. The Freys had never intended the twins to be pretty. They were meant to be ugly and impenetrable, a stone throat closed around the river's neck. But even an ugly thing told its story to those who listened. 6, she said after a moment. 2 sets of 3, stacked. No 8. There are 2 more set wider, almost hidden behind that broken bit of masonry. Brynden grunted approval. Always look for what doesn't want to be seen. Now the eastern tower, same level. She followed the sweep of his pointing gloved hand. 8 again. No, 9. 1 slit is narrower higher up, but there's movement behind it. A man, I think. Too many. One of the men behind them shifted in his saddle. When I was a boy, my father brought me here for a marriage that meant less than this. There were half as many men on those walls and twice as many in the yard. Lord Walder is old and fearful, another scoffed. He has sons and grandsons enough to man every slit in that old stone if he likes. And crossbows enough to arm them all? Brynden asked mildly. Look again. How many shadows move like archers? And how many like men merely walking a wall to stave off boredom? A chill traced its fingers up Arya's spine. She did not need his prompting to see it now. The purposeful way the men shifted, the way some cradled the long, awkward shapes of crossbows in their arms instead of resting pikes or spears. The clusters were not even placed where they could rake the approaches with bolts. She thought of the man's laugh by the fire, hidden crossbows, music with sharp ends. Robb needs to know, she said. He will, Brynden replied. When I tell him. He sat a moment longer, studying the towers. Arya followed his gaze and saw other things now she hadn't at first. The extra carts lined up near the sally port, canvas covered with edges of something hard and angular pressing up from beneath. The unusually heavy guard at the inner gate. The line of unsaddled horses led out of the courtyard, their riders apparently dismounted and kept in. When you go within, Brynden said quietly, without looking at her, remember that a man who plots murder under his own roof will smile wider than any other host. The more he beams, the more he despises you. Walder Frey has always smiled too much. If he seems kinder than you've heard, that's when you tighten your hand on your blade. I know what a liar looks like, Arya said. I've seen plenty. I don't doubt it. His eyes softened for a moment. But I would have you see plenty more yet. My niece brought you back to us at great cost to herself. Let's not make a liar of the gods by letting you die in some filthy corridor of a bridge castle. She almost smiled at that. Then we make sure the corridors run red for the right men, not the wrong ones. He glanced at her sidelong. A grim little wolf. A living one, she said. They turned their horses back toward the waiting camp before the light failed entirely. Behind them, the twins loomed above the mist, torches winking like watchful eyes. The camp settled into its nighttime rhythms with the weary familiarity of men who had marched too far and fought too long. Fires burned low, ringed with hunched shapes sharing stories and stale bread. The smell of boiled beef mingled with horse sweat and damp wool. Somewhere, a fiddle scraped out a tune that might once have been jolly before exhaustion bled it thin. Arya carved out a little space for herself between two supply wagons, away from the worst of the mud. She had dragged a straw-stuffed sack from a pile and lashed it to a post with lengths of frayed rope, fashioning a crude practice dummy. It was a poor opponent. It never cursed, never lunged, never swung a sword of its own. But it was something to hit. She moved through the steps Syrio Farrell had taught her in another life, in a sunny room in King's Landing that seemed as distant now as the songs of ancient Valyria. The water dancer steps. Left, right, lunge, turn. Needle darted in her hand, the point finding the places between imagined plates of armor, between ribs under an arm at a throat. Swift as a deer, she murmured under her breath. Quiet as shadow. Fear cuts deeper than swords. The straw rustled as she drove the blade in, withdrew, drove it again. Sweat rose under her patched tunic despite the creeping cold. Snowflakes, small and tentative, drifted from the sky to melt on her cheeks. You'll wear yourself out before we even reach the twins, a familiar voice said. She turned, breath clouding in the light from a nearby brazier. Robb leaned against one of the wagon wheels, arms folded, the fire painting his face in flickers of gold and shadow. Gray wind lay at his feet, head on his paws, watching with that lupin stillness that was somehow livelier than many men. I've been more tired, Arya said, and I've fought worse than straw. I know you have. His gaze dropped to Needle, then rose again. Mother told me some of it. Harrenhal, King's Landing, the road, gods, Arya. If I'd known. You didn't. She wiped the blade on her sleeve and slid it back into its sheath. Knowing wouldn't have changed it. The world doesn't stop to ask what kings want. He huffed a laugh at that. You sound like the Blackfish. Maybe he's right. For a moment they stood in silence, listening to the low murmur of the camp. Snow dusted Robb's hair, catching on the curls. It made him look older and younger at once, like a boy wearing a mantle far too heavy. When you ran from Winterfell to chase cats, I used to be furious, he said softly. I'd think, where's Arya now? Underfoot again, causing trouble. You'd come back with your hair wild and mud on your face and father would just smile. He shook his head. Now I'd give anything to go back to that. To have my worst worry be which of my little sisters is more likely to set the sept ablaze by accident. Sansa wouldn't, Arya said automatically, then grimaced. She'd never go near the sept with a torch. No, he sobered. We still don't know where she is. The last word placed her in King's Landing. But that was long ago. and ravens are being plucked out of the sky faster than we can send them. I'll find her, Arya said. When this is done, I'll make a list and put her name at the top. Then I'll find everyone who hurt us and put them beneath. A list, he echoed, smile crooked. You always did love your lists. Names in the training yard, names in the stables, names of every horse in the castle. These are different names, she said quietly. He didn't ask which. Perhaps he didn't want to know. His gaze drifted toward the faint smudge on the horizon that was the twins, invisible in the dark but no less present in their minds. You were right to ride to me, he said. Whatever waits there, we'll meet it with our eyes open now. You saved me, Arya. It was a strange thing to hear. In all her long nights alone, she had imagined bursting into halls with a sword drawn, cutting down executioners, dragging her father from the steps of the September, pulling King Joffrey from the throne by his golden hair. In none of those daydreams had she simply ridden hard through the rain to tell a secret. Don't make it a song yet, she muttered. We're not through this. No. He pushed off the wagon, straightening. But I wanted you to know that whatever happens, you gave us a fighting chance. Gray wind rose when he did, stretching, jaws parting in a wide yawn that showed a flash of yellowed teeth. The dire wolf padded close to Arya, bumping her hip with his head in rough approval before trotting after his master. She watched them go, a tall young king and his too clever wolf, the snow beginning to feather the dark hair of both. When they vanished into the maze of tents, she turned back to her straw man, drawing needle once more. Vala Morgulis, she whispered, driving the point straight through where its heart would be. But not my pack. Not this time. It was not in Arya's nature to sit still and trust that others would find all the answers. Robb had his scouts and his trusted lords, Catelyn her quiet counsel, Brynden his ridges and river mists. She had her own weapons. Smallness, silence, the knack of slipping where eyes slid away. The Frey envoys had been given a cluster of tents near the outer edge of the camp, close enough to honor their status as representatives of their lord, far enough that no man forgot he might one day be ordered to draw steel on them. Their banners, those same twin towers, now stitched clean and bright, hung limply in the still air. Arya watched from the lee of a supply wagon as two of the envoy's men ducked into one of the tents. They were not highborn themselves. Their cloaks were good wool but plain, their boots sturdy but not soft enough for a lord's comfort. That made them more likely to talk freely in her experience. Noblemen hid behind courtesy, common men hid behind laughter and drink, and sometimes they forgot to hide at all. Snow pricked her cheeks as she slunk closer, the flakes swirling in little gusts around the tent ropes. She found a gap where the canvas did not quite meet the ground and flattened herself to the cold earth, pressing her ear close. Don't like it? One voice muttered, words clipped with the nasal whine she was coming to think of as uniquely Frey. Crossing the young wolf's camp like we're strolling in our own hall. Those wolves look at me with man's eyes. It'll be over soon, another replied, older, wearier. The old man has given his word, and Lord Tywin has given his. The song will play, the wine will flow, the knives will drink, and when the sun rises the north will be leaderless. Then these wolves will tuck their tails under them and slink back past the wall or kneel like good dogs. You're certain of that? The younger demanded. There's talk in our own ranks, you know, of curses, of guest right, of the gods' wrath. The gods have had their chance, the older man said dryly. They watched Lord Walder wed girl after girl while the realm bled and did nothing. You think they'll rouse themselves over a few more corpses? Arya's nails dug into the earth. What if the king refuses the music? The young Frey asked. What if he gives the order to ride out again before it starts? The old man said. The old man has accounted for that, the elder snapped. Lord Bolton sits his right hand. If the king grows skittish, there are other ways to prick him into place. A harsh word, a reminder of oaths broken, a jest about his pretty westerling wife. Men like him are predictable. Pride can be a leash if you pull it right. Lord Bolton. Arya remembered the pale man from Harrenhal, the quiet one who had worn leeches like jewels. Her stomach turned. "Still," the young man said, "this talk of songs and signals. What if someone outside the hall hears the first notes? What if they have men with ears sharp as hounds? Then they will hear a tune played and think nothing of it," the elder replied. "We are not the only ones who have used music to mask the sound of death. Your tongue will be the first to taste steel if you cannot still it." A moment later she heard the shift of weight, the creak of leather as one of them moved closer to the tent wall. Arya rolled back into the shadows just as booted feet appeared where her head had been, the canvas bulging slightly outward. She held her breath, pressed against the cold side of a wagon, every sense straining. Snow fell thicker now, swirling vertiginously in the lamplight. The camp noises continued unabated. A man laughed. Somewhere a horse snorted. A pot clanged. After a few heartbeats, the boots moved away. She heard the murmur of low argument continue, but it was enough. More than enough. By the time she slipped back into the Stark half of the camp, her fingers and toes were numb, but her mind blazed. She went first to Brynden's tent, where a guard outside looked as if he wanted to stop her and thought better of it when he saw her face. The Blackfish listened with that same stony attentiveness, then sent for Robb and Catelyn with a single curt word. When she repeated what she had heard, Robb's eyes went flat and cold. "Bolton," he said, with a contempt that flensed the title from the name. "I trusted him with men and castles, with my voice in the Dreadfort. And all this time he's been sharpening knives with Lannisters and Freys." "I had my doubts," Catelyn said softly. His quiet made me uneasy. A man who barely speaks in council has many words in his head. "I should have listened," Robb said. "Instead I worried more about not offending him than I did about what he might be hiding." His gaze returned to Arya. "You heard this yourself?" "Yes." She lifted her chin, daring him to doubt. "I know what a frightened man sounds like, and what a man who thinks he's on the winning side sounds like." "Good." He turned to the Blackfish. "We tighten the circle, Uncle. No man of Bolton's goes unobserved. No Frey envoy moves alone. And when we go into that hall, we bring more than good manners." A grim smile curved his mouth. "If Walder Frey wants to play us a song, we'll make sure the dance is one he doesn't expect." Sleep came poorly to kings, Arya thought, watching the faint silhouette of her brother as it moved against the tent wall. The lantern inside cast his shadow long and thin, expanding and contracting with his pacing. Gray winds lower, heavier form moved with him, the two shapes intertwined. She sat on an overturned crate just beyond the lamplight, cloak tight around her shoulders, snow gathering lightly on the hood. Robb had ordered her to her bedroll an hour ago. She had nodded, slipped away into the darkness, and settled instead where she could see the light in his tent and hear, if not the words, then the cadence of his movement. The guards flanking the entrance had objected at first. "His Grace asked to be left alone," one had said, young enough that his beard still grew patchy. Arya had fixed him with the flat stare she'd seen the Hound use and said, "I'm not going in, I'm just sitting. If you can't keep watch while I sit, maybe you shouldn't be here at all." After that, they had looked away, embarrassed. Now they shifted from foot to foot, blowing on their hands, spear points dark against the snow-flecked sky. Inside, Robb was arguing with himself, if the sharp turns of his shadow were anything to judge by. Arya imagined the map spread again on the table, the wooden wolf perched at the edge of the twins, the carved lions on the other side of the river, waiting. She knew what it was to pace like that. She had done it in Harrenhal's stinking storerooms, in barn lofts, in ditches with her cloak pulled over her head against the rain. Each step measured out a choice she did not like. Stay, run, hide, fight. At last the pacing stopped. The silhouette bent over the table. She pictured his hand closing on the direwolf token, the same way hers closed around Needle, claiming it, committing. A moment later, the tent flap twitched. Robb stepped out into the night, furs thrown over his shoulders, the snow catching in his hair like a faint crown. Gray wind came at his heel, eyes reflecting the lantern's glow. He saw her at once. "You're meant to be asleep," he said, not unkindly. "I could say the same," Arya replied. He huffed a laugh. "That is your curse, little sister. You never did know when to leave well enough alone." He walked past the guards, who stood stiff as pikes, and came to stand beside her crate. For a time they watched the camp together in silence. The banked fires, the dim hulks of wagons, the slow movement of sentries. "I've decided," he said at last. She waited. "We go to the twins," he continued. "We accept Walder's bread and salt. We let him seat us and sing us his songs and pour our wine. But we go not as lambs to slaughter. Every man will be warned. Armor beneath cloaks, blades where they can be drawn quickly. We'll place our own archers in the yards, ostensibly for a display of northern marksmanship to entertain our host." His mouth quirked. "If he thinks to shower us with bolts, he'll find the rain falling both ways." "You'll be surrounded," Arya said, "even with armor, with armed men. If they close the doors, then we break them," he said quietly, "or die trying. But we will not bow our heads and smile while knives are aimed at our backs." He looked down at her. "Your warning has given us the chance to make ready. That is more than most men get before they walk into betrayal. It's not enough." The words slipped out before she could leash them. "I want him afraid, Walder Frey. I want him to see your banners and know. I want him to sweat." "He will," Robb said. "Fear is a sharp spur. A frightened man makes mistakes. We'll be watching for them." His gaze softened. "You've done enough for one day, Arya. More than enough. Go and warm yourself. Tomorrow will be hard." "Tomorrow hasn't come yet," she replied. "There's still tonight." He smiled then, truly smiled, the way he had when he'd taken her hand to pull her up on the walls of Winterfell years ago. "You always were greedy for more hours in the day." He reached out, briefly ruffling her hacked hair. "Rest. That's an order from your king." Then he turned away, cloak swirling, and strode back toward the tent, gray wind pacing at his side. The lantern flared as he ducked inside, then steadied. Arya stayed where she was until the cold had seeped into her bones so deeply she imagined she could hear them ring when she shifted. Only then did she rise, feeling older than her years and yet strangely light. Tomorrow they would ride to the twins. Tomorrow the song would begin. But this time, she thought, as she picked her way back to the small cluster of tents where her bedroll waited, this time the wolves would already be baring their teeth. Morning came pale and hard, like a blade that had forgotten how to shine. The snow that had flirted with the camp during the night had turned to a thin crust of ice in the hours before dawn, crackling under hooves and boots as the army formed ranks. Men stamped their feet and blew steam into their gloved hands, armor creaking, horses tossing their heads. Arya rode near the front by Robb's order, though she suspected he had placed her there as much so he could keep her in sight as for anything else. Her stolen gelding had been traded for a smaller, surer-footed mare, gray as river fog and twice as stubborn. The beast snorted when she urged it into line beside her brother's larger warhorse, ears twitching nervously at the proximity of gray wind. "Easy," Arya murmured, patting the mare's neck. "He's on our side." Gray Wind glanced up at her with amber eyes that said he was on no one's side but the pack's. Even so, he kept to Robb's stirrup without brushing against Arya's mount, his paws silent on the frozen ground. The twins rose ahead of them as they crested a low rise, shouldering up out of the river like two ancient, sullen sentries. Up close, the towers were uglier still, weathered stone pocked and patched, the spans between them squat and utilitarian. Frey banners hung limp in the cold air. The twin tower's sigil repeated again and again until Arya's eyes wanted to slide away from it. "It looks like two old men glaring at each other," she said under her breath. Robb almost smiled. "Fitting." His gaze never left the castle. "Remember what we spoke of. No wandering once we're inside. You stay near Mother or Uncle Brynden. If anything seems off, you find one of us." She frowned. "Everything already seems off." "I know." His hand tightened on the reins. That's why we're going in with our eyes open." He twisted in his saddle, raising his voice so the nearest ranks could hear. "Armor under your finery," he called. "Helms at hand, not left on saddles. No man drinks more than he can fight on. There are to be no brawls, no boasting, no insults to Lord Walder's kin. Politeness will cost you nothing. Carelessness may cost you your life." A rumble of acknowledgement went through the columns. Arya could almost taste the tension in the air, sharp as the bite of frost. These were men who had followed Robb through battles won and lost, who had buried sons and brothers beneath the muddy fields of the Trident. They were not fools. They had heard enough whispers about Frey pride and Lannister gold to know that this wedding feast might be more than it seemed. As they descended toward the causeway, a smaller party rode out to meet them. Frey men, thin-faced and narrow-mouthed, their cloaks finer than the envoys but still lacking the easy richness of true great lords. They reined in half a spear's length from Robb's horse, the lead rider's expression schooled into courteous disdain. "King Robb," he said, inclining his head just enough to satisfy courtesy without denting pride. "I am Ser Ryman Frey, sent by Lord Walder to bid you welcome to the twins." "Ser Ryman," Robb replied evenly. "I thank Lord Walder for his hospitality. I trust the preparations for my uncle's wedding go well." "As well as can be expected," Ser Ryman sniffed. "The bread is baked, the beds are made. All that is missing is the groom and his grace, who is late." "We rode as swiftly as conditions allowed," Robb said. "I have brought such men as I can spare from the Riverlands without leaving our gains unwatched. The Lannisters have long arms." "Indeed." Ser Ryman's gaze flicked over the ranks behind Robb, taking in the number of spears, the hulking shapes of northern men, the glint of mail under cloaks. "Lord Walder is eager to mend any ill feeling between your houses. He has had great pains over this feast." "I am sure he has," Robb said, and Arya, riding close enough to hear, thought his tone a fraction too dry for courtesy. "We will not add to them. We come as guests under the eyes of gods and men." Ser Ryman's mouth twisted, almost a smile. "Then let the gods bear witness," he said. "You and your foremost lords may cross and be received with all due honor. Your men will be shown to the yards and barracks and provided with food and ale. And I trust," Catelyn said from the other side of Robb, her voice smooth as still water, "that Lord Walder's halls are large enough that none need be turned away into the cold." Ryman hesitated. "They are roomy," he allowed. "Lord Walder is not unmindful of the packs his guests bring." "Good." Catelyn's eyes did not leave his face. "He would not wish to give offense a second time, I am sure." The Frey knight's jaw tightened. Arya doubted he was used to seeing small, slender women treat his lord's name like a tool and a weapon. The space between the two parties seemed to draw taut like a bowstring. Then Robb inclined his head, breaking the moment. "Lead on, Ser Ryman," he said. "We are eager to get our men out of the cold." As they followed the Freys toward the narrow causeway between the towers, Arya's fingers went unconsciously to Needle's hilt beneath her cloak. The stone bridge ahead seemed suddenly more like a throat again, and they were the breath being drawn in. This time, she promised herself, the breath would not be choked off. The hall at the heart of the twins had none of Winterfell's stark dignity nor Riverrun's river-light grace. It was low-ceilinged and smoky, its beams blackened by years of fires and neglect. Frey banners hung from the rafters like old, stained teeth, their twin towers stitched over and over as if repetition alone could lend them majesty. The smell hit Arya as soon as they crossed the threshold. Roast meat, spilled ale, damp wool, and something under it all like old bones. Men's voices rolled and eddied, laughter forced a little too loud, the scrape of benches sharpening it all. Walder Frey sat on his high seat at the far end, a bundle of sharp angles wrapped in furs. His skin stretched thin and pale over a face that had never been handsome and had grown more unpleasant with age. His lips puckered as if every word he spoke tasted sour, his eyes small and sharp as a weasel's. Around him clustered sons and grandsons and great-grandsons, a living hedge of Freys in every stage of life and decay. At his right hand sat Roose Bolton. Arya felt her stomach clench. He was as she remembered him from Harrenhal. Pale, composed, his eyes the washed-out blue of ice over deep water. The pink, flayed man of his house curled on his doublet in cruel contrast. He did not look like a man who laughed by firesides about slaughter. He looked like a man who measured knives and chose the one that would cut deepest. Robb and Catelyn walked side by side up the hall, the eyes of hundreds on them. Robb's armor was hidden beneath a well-cut tunic of gray and blue, the direwolf of Stark and the trout of Tully combined on his chest. But Arya knew where the mail lay by the way his shoulders moved, the faint clink when he stepped. Catelyn wore a dark gown, the only jewelry at her throat a simple silver seven-pointed star. Her hair was bound back with river pearls, her expression composed. Arya did not go with them to the head table. That had not been her part in the plan. Instead, she slipped away with a knot of servants bearing platters, her borrowed dress plain and her hair tucked under a cap. No one looked twice at a thin girl carrying jugs of watered wine. From the periphery she could see everything. The way Walder's mouth pinched when Robb bowed, the brief flare of satisfaction when the king accepted the offer of bread and salt. The old man's fingers lingered over the crust he extended, as if savoring the moment. "Lord Walder," Robb said, taking the bread, "I come to the twins in peace, to mend old wrongs and celebrate new bonds." "We shall see about peace," Walder rasped, his voice surprisingly strong for so withered a body. "You broke faith with me, boy. Weddings are not cloaks you can shrug off when the mood takes you." Robb broke the bread carefully, as Catelyn had reminded him, and ate. "I did you wrong," he said. "For that, I offer apology and amends, in the sight of gods and men. My uncle will wed your daughter and bring her to Riverrun as his lady. The bond between our houses will be as strong as if I had taken the vow myself." Walder sniffed. "My daughter gets a second-hand groom, and I'm to smile as if that makes up for the first slight?" His gaze flicked to Catelyn. "You bring your lady mother to do your apologizing for you, at least. I always did like Tully women at my table." Catelyn's smile did not reach her eyes. "We are in your debt for your patience, Lord Walder," she said. "My son's choices have been hasty at times. War makes fools of us all." "Speak for yourself," Walder muttered, but he lifted his hand and clapped. "Bread and salt have been taken. You are under my roof. Let it not be said that House Frey does not know how to treat guests." His eyes gleamed with something Arya did not like. "Music, wine. Let us wed this groom and girl before the meat grows cold." The musicians, clustered on a raised platform, launched into a lively tune that sent the younger Freys and Riverlords into motion. Servants surged forward with jugs and platters, the hall filling with the clatter of plates and the scrape of chairs. Arya moved with them, invisible and small. She carried wine first to the tables where northern lordlings sat shoulder to shoulder, their shoulders tense under wool and steel. She saw the glint of hidden mail at their collars, the way their hands never strayed far from their belts. Great John Umber laughed loudest of all, but his one good eye never stopped roving. At another table, Karstark men sat with their shoulders hunched, grief making their eyes hollow. They had lost their lord to Robb's justice. Their presence here was a fragile thing held together by duty and necessity. Arya slipped between them, filling cups, catching snatches of low conversation. "Don't like the way that Bolton looks at us," one muttered, "like we're cuts of meat to be hung." "Leave him to the king," another replied. "We've heads enough to worry about without fretting over his leeches." Near the center, Edmure Tully sat beside his new bride, Rosalind Frey, a pale little bird with large eyes and hands that twisted constantly in her lap. Edmure looked bewildered by his good fortune, torn between guilt over his tardy obedience and the shy delight of a man who has found more kindness than he expected. Arya poured his wine and caught his soft, earnest murmur to his new wife. "I will do right by you," he was saying. "Whatever wrongs there have been between our kin, I'll not add to them." Rosalind's fingers tightened on his. Tears shone in her eyes. "I know," she whispered. "I know you won't, my lord." There was fear in her voice too, not of Edmure, of something larger looming. Arya moved on before the girl could look up and perhaps see too much recognition in the servant's gaze. From the high table, Walder's cackle cut across the music like cracked bone. Roose Bolton sat beside him, answering some remark with a thin, measured reply. His eyes flicked once across the hall over the musicians, the armed men, the servants, the door. They did not linger on Arya. She was grateful for that. Beyond the hall's thick doors, other preparations were in motion. The courtyard on the northern side of the twins had been cleared of most of its usual clutter: wagons, dung heaps, training dummies, by Frey order to make room for northern tents. Robb had taken the liberty of rearranging further. Now, under the guise of a display of northern marksmanship promised to Lord Walder, bowmen stood in matched ranks, their longbows unstrung but ready, quivers close to hand. "Look like you're just drilling," Small John Umber murmured as he passed down their line, his breath smoking in the cold. "If any Frey comes sniffing, you're practicing for a little show to amuse the old goat. When you hear the signal, you stop amusing and start killing." "Understood." A murmur of assent ran through the archers. Many had been with Robb since the first banners were called in the north. They had seen enough Frey men on battlefields by now to know how they moved, how they died. In the lee of a low wall, the Blackfish oversaw the placement of a second group. Shieldmen and spearmen positioned so they could rush the main doors of the hall or bar them from without, depending on how the dance went. Their mail was plain and battered. Their shields bore no fancy heraldry. Men like that were often overlooked. Grey Wind paced, restless, near the gate that opened toward the river. His fur was dusted with snow, his ears twitching at every change in sound from the hall beyond. He did not like stone walls, Arya had been told. The wolves hated being penned more than any man. This time, the pen would close on someone else. "Keep him calm," Brynden said to the handler who stood nearest the direwolf, rope in hand more as a courtesy than a necessity. "When the time comes, we may need his teeth, not his temper snapping at our own men." The handler nodded, eyes never leaving the huge beast. "He knows," he said. "Maybe not the words, but the scent. Bolton men stink of something he doesn't trust, and the Freys, well, even a blind dog could tell Freys apart from honest folk." A door creaked open from within, spilling a brief wash of music and firelight into the courtyard before it shut again. A Frey undercaptain stepped out, tucking his cloak tighter around himself. His gaze swept over the assembled archers, brows knitting. "What's all this?" he demanded. "Thought your king promised some grand display, not half his bowmen trampling Lord Walder's yard." "Our king believes in practice," the Blackfish said smoothly, stepping forward with a courteous half-bow. "War has taught him the value of keeping men's arms limber. We would not want to shame our gracious host by missing our marks when we perform." The undercaptain sniffed. "See that you don't put any stray shafts in my lord's chickens," he said, "or his guests. He won't like it if his daughters arrive at the bedding already skewered." Laughter from the men at his back. Brynden smiled thinly. "We're very particular about where we put our shafts," he said. The Frey's smile curdled. He turned on his heel and stalked away, muttering. When the door closed behind him again, Brynden's expression flattened. "Watch that one," he told Small John. "He smells of trouble." "Like the rest of them," Small John said. "Some rats bite harder than others." The Blackfish glanced up at the sky, snowflakes caught in his lashes. "The day grows old. Keep your ears open. When you hear the first wrong note, you loose." The feast grew louder as the sun sank and the torches burned lower, the heat inside the hall turning the air thick and stifling. Sweat beaded on brows, mixed with the grease of rich meat and the spill of wine. The floor grew slick underfoot where juices and ale had splashed, the straw scattered there to soak it up already sodden. Laughter rose and fell in waves. Frey men clapped their hands to the music, sometimes a beat off, sometimes too quickly, as if eager to get to some unspoken end. River lords toasted one another with forced bonhomie. Northern men bent their heads close, exchanging low words under cover of the noise. Arya moved among them, her tray growing lighter with every cup drained and refilled. She watched more than she poured, her eyes skipping from face to face, memorizing expressions, the way men's shoulders sat, the fidgets of hands. At the high table, Walder Frey grew more animated with each passing course. His jaw worked like a chewing insect's as he spat crude jests at his guests. He pinched his young wife's arm when she did not laugh quickly enough, tugged her closer when she flinched away. "And this is the famous king in the north," he was saying now, voice pitched to carry. "Pretty as a maiden, though not so pretty as the girl he tossed my daughter aside for." A murmur rippled through the hall. Robb's jaw tightened, but he inclined his head. "I have already said I did you wrong, Lord Walder," he said evenly. "I will say it again if it eases your mind. I am sorry." Walder's eyes narrowed. "Sorry," he mocked. "He's sorry. Hear that, my sons? The boy king is sorry he shamed our house." He leaned forward, lips peeling back. "And what would you be, your grace, if I had served your father's head to you on a tray and said I was sorry while you chewed?" Catelyn's hand landed lightly on Robb's arm. A reminder, an anchor. The king in the north took a slow breath. "I'd say you were a man with a poor notion of hospitality," he replied. "But I am not my father, and you have not served me his head, for which I am grateful." Some of the sting deflected, some but not all. Walder sniffed, harumphed, then cackled. "You've a tongue in your head, I'll grant you that. We'll see if you're still so quick with it after a few more cups." Roose Bolton sat silent beside him, his pale eyes flicking from Walder to Robb to the hall at large. His hand lay on the table, fingers long and pale, resting near the hilt of a dagger sheathed beneath the high board. Not gripping, not yet, just touching, like a man reacquainting his hand with an old friend. Arya's skin prickled. She shifted, angling herself so she could see more of the hall. Frey men along the walls had begun drifting closer to the edges of the crowd, cups held in hands that did not drink. A few had slipped away entirely, their places taken by others with crossbows slung across their backs as if forgotten there. The musicians paused between songs, retuning strings, wiping sweat from their brows. For a heartbeat, the hall's noise dropped, conversations stuttering as if some invisible hand had plucked a thread. Walder lifted his cup. "A song," he cried. "A special song for special guests. You know the one." He made a vague gesture at the musicians. "Play it for our noble king, that he may remember it long." Arya's breath caught. Her heart began to pound, a drum against her ribs. This was it. This was the moment she had heard described in drunken murmurs by a fire, the moment when music would turn to murder. She slipped through the crowd as the first tentative notes were plucked from harp and viol. Her feet moved without her quite willing them, carrying her toward the side door that led to the courtyard, where northern archers waited with their own music. On the dais, Robb's hand had drifted toward the table's underside, where a sword hung concealed in its sheath. Catelyn's eyes were on Walder's face, on the slight curl at the corner of his mouth. Roose Bolton's fingers tightened, ever so slightly, on his dagger hilt. The musicians found the tune. It was not a song Arya knew by name, but its cadence was wrong. The hairs on the back of her neck rose. The first notes slid into the air, thin and bright, a treacherous sweetness. The hall quieted as if lulled, conversations dampening, heads turning toward the musicians. Arya, halfway to the side door, felt the shift like a change in pressure before a storm. From her angle near the doorframe, she could see the raised platform clearly. The fiddler fingers danced on the strings, the harpist's eyes fixed not on his instrument, but on some unseen point above the king's head. A drummer at the back tapped out a rhythm that did not quite match the beat of the tune, as if he were counting something else entirely. The banners along the hall's walls stirred, though no breeze had entered. Behind them, shadows moved, the glint of metal, the long, narrow shape of crossbow stocks. A Frey man near the nearest banner shifted, his hand creeping toward the fabric as if to draw it aside. His eyes were on Walder, waiting for a nod, a gesture, a raised finger. It never came. Instead, a different signal cut the air. In the courtyard, Brynden Tully's hand rose as the first strain of the song reached his ears through the stone. The archers stiffened. Snow fell between them and the hall door in slow, white spirals. "For Winterfell," the Blackfish said, not loudly. "Loose." The first volley hissed through the small windows and open slits into the hall, arrows singing a counter-melody to the musician's treacherous tune. One shaft took a Frey in the throat as he drew his crossbow, pinning him to the banner behind. Another punched through the eye of a man on the balcony, flinging him backward with a strangled cry. Inside, screams rose, mingling with the music in a discordant wail. Arya saw the Frey by the nearest banner jerk as an arrow sprouted from his shoulder. His hand spasmed, yanking the cloth aside to reveal two more crossbowmen crouched behind. One loosed wildly, the bolt skittering off a shield as a northern lord surged to his feet. Robb moved with the speed of a man who had already rehearsed this moment in his mind a dozen times. His sword sang free from beneath the table, the map of the twins and the carved wooden wolf forgotten in favor of steel. He shoved his bench back, rising as the first bolts flew, knocking Catelyn aside with a shove that sent her sprawling behind the table's thick legs. "Now!" he roared. The word slammed through the hall like another arrow. Northern men sprang up from benches, cloaks flaring to reveal the gleam of mail, the hilts of swords and axes. Some had shields already slung over their backs. They yanked them forward, raising them toward the walls where bolts began to rain. Others overturned tables, sending trencher and cup flying as they rolled them up as makeshift barricades. Great John Umber laughed like a man who had just woken from a year-long sleep to find a fight waiting. He seized the nearest Frey by his collar and flung him bodily into a cluster of crossbowmen, shouting, "You think to hunt wolves at their own feast, you spineless lot?" Walder Frey's eyes bulged. For a heartbeat, his mouth worked soundlessly as the neat script of his plan was defaced before him. What is this?" he croaked, half rising from his high seat. "This," Catelyn said from behind the table, her voice sharp as broken glass, "is what happens when you try to murder guests under your own roof." Roose Bolton's hand, still on his dagger, slid it free at last. But his arm did not move in the direction it had been meant to. The world contracted to a flurry of motion and sound. Steel screams, the twang of bowstrings, the dull thud of bodies hitting wood and stone. Arya flattened herself against the doorframe as a bolt shattered the air where her head had been, splintering against the stone archway and showering her with chips. She saw Robb and Roose move almost as one, their blades flashing in the smoky light. Bolton had not expected to be challenged so quickly. That much was clear in the slight widening of his pale eyes when Robb's sword met his own with a jarring clang. For a moment they were close enough that Arya could imagine they spoke, though if they did, the words were lost in the hall's roar. "You were meant to be my knife," Robb might have said with his eyes. "My betrayer. I am no one's knife but my own," Roose's icy stare replied. Their swords slid apart. Bolton moved like water, economical, every motion measured. Robb fought like the North. Direct, powerful, with a fury that made up in ferocity what it lacked in subtlety. The table beside them toppled as they pivoted, scattering dishes and candles. Wax spattered the floor. A torch tumbled, setting alight a spill of wine that had soaked into straw. Walder Frey scrambled backward on his high seat like a spider startled in its web. His sons closed around him, drawing swords, but the tight crush of bodies and the press of men surging toward the dais from below made their movements clumsy. Catelyn rose from behind the overturned table, a dagger in her hand. Where she had gotten it Arya did not see. Perhaps she had pulled it from some fallen man's belt, perhaps she had had it hidden all along. Her face was set in a mask of terrible calm as she slashed at a Frey who lunged toward her, opening his cheek from ear to jaw. "You would slaughter my son in front of me?" she hissed. "I watched one die already. I won't watch another. Lady, he gurgled, stumbling back, hands flying to his face. Across the hall, Edmure Tully had his new bride shielded behind him, his own sword drawn. He looked more surprised than anyone to find the steel in his hand, but his grip was steady as he parried a clumsy blow from a Frey cousin. Rosalind clung to his back, sobbing, words lost. Servants screamed and scattered, some ducking under tables, others fleeing toward the doors that led deeper into the castle. Arya seized the moment to slip fully into the hall, the wooden tray still clutched in her hand like a makeshift shield. She swung it up just in time to deflect a wild swing from a panicked man who seemed not to know who he was trying to hit. The edge of his sword bit into the tray, lodging there. Arya stepped into him, driving her knee up hard between his legs. As he doubled over with a strangled grunt, she dropped the tray and drew needle in one swift movement, driving the slender blade up under his jaw and into the soft flesh there. His eyes went wide. Hot wetness spilled over her hand. She yanked the sword free and let him fall. Swift as a deer, quiet as shadow. On the dais, Robb and Roose broke apart again. Bolton had the longer blade, a pale, cruel thing that seemed almost like a sliver of bone. He fainted low, then cut high, forcing Robb to twist aside. A bolt whistled between them, burying itself in the back of a Frey who had been charging toward the king, courtesy of some unseen archer outside. You think you can stand against Lannister gold and Frey treachery with only steel and suspicion? Roose said, almost conversationally, as their blades met again. I stand with the North, Robb grunted, teeth bared. That's more than you can say. Perhaps, Roose murmured. But the North is very far from here. He twisted, trying to slide past Robb's guard. A gray wind was there, a gray thunderbolt launching up onto the dais. The direwolf's jaws closed on Bolton's sword arm, teeth sinking through leather and flesh to bone. Roose hissed, the sound sharp and sibilant, as blood spurted. He tore himself free with brutal force, leaving ragged meat behind. His sword clanged to the floor, fingers spasming open. Gray wind shook his head like a dog worrying a rat, and something snapped. Roose stumbled back, clutching his ruined arm. His calm had cracked at last. His eyes, wide and suddenly mortal, flicked from the wolf to the king. Robb stepped forward, his sword point steady. You broke faith with me, he said, voice carrying even over the chaos. With the North. Roose Bolton opened his mouth, perhaps to offer some icy justification, some last defense of the choices that had led him here. Robb's sword took him in the chest before he could speak. The point slid between ribs, seeking the heart as cleanly as needle had sought the throat of Arya's man below. For a heartbeat, Roose seemed almost to sag in relief. Cold, he whispered, and then he folded to the floor, his pale eyes staring at nothing. The hall had become a maze of fire and shadow, the low ceiling trapping smoke until it hung in thick, roiling bands. Torches guttered as currents of air shifted, fed by open doors and the rush of bodies. Somewhere a table had been overturned onto a brazier, and a curtain near the musician's platform flared up, casting a lurid orange light over the nearest faces. Arya moved through it all with needle in her hand and her list ghosting at the edges of her thoughts. Not the old list, not exactly. Not Joffrey and Cersei and Island Pain whispered into her pillow at night, but new names that fit old shapes. Frey men leering like Lannisters, crossbowmen with cold eyes like Meryn Trance, older men with oily smiles like Littlefingers, though she had never seen him up close. She slid under a wild swing from a Frey's longsword, the blade singing inches over her head. Her shoulder brushed the fallen body of a northern man, his eyes staring at the beams. Blood slicked the floor beneath her boots. She planted one hand, thrust up and forward, needle's point finding the gap between the Frey's gorget and his beard. Hot spray hit her cheek as he fell. Vala Morgulis, she whispered, more habit than prayer. A man lunged at her from the side, a dagger in his hand. She caught his wrist with her free hand, feeling the sinews strain under her fingers, and twisted, pivoting as Syrio had taught her. His momentum carried him past her, into the path of a Stark bannerman's axe. The blade bit into his shoulder, carving down, and he shrieked as he went down, the dagger skittering away. The bannerman, tall heart, she thought, by the sigil on his shield, grunted in thanks, then wrenched his axe free to seek another foe. There was no time for more than that. Each heartbeat had someone else in it, someone who wanted her dead. She saw a Frey aiming a crossbow down into the press of men. His gaze locked on the patch of gray where Robb fought near the dais. Without thinking, she grabbed a half-empty jug from a toppled table and flung it. It spun through the smoky air and shattered against his arm, startling him, knocking the shot astray. The bolt flew wide, slamming into a beam instead. His head snapped toward her, furious. He lifted the crossbow as if to club her with it. Arya was already moving, diving between two grappling men, sliding over spilled ale and grit, needle leading. By the time he realized how small she was, how close, it was too late. The point drove into his gut, slipping past leather and mail links into the vulnerable softness beneath. He stared down at her with disbelief, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. She wrenched the blade free, dodging as he collapsed to his knees. Smoke thickened. She coughed, eyes stinging. The musicians had abandoned their instruments, some trying to flee, others caught in the melee. One lay sprawled over his harp, his fingers still tangled in the strings, an arrow jutting from his back. The doors to the courtyard burst inward. Northern shieldmen surged through, shields raised, pushing back knots of Freys who had been trying to bar the entrances from the outside. The fresh air that rushed and carried with it the cold bite of snow and the sound of shouted battle prayers. For the North, for Winterfell, for the king. It was impossible to tell who shouted what. It hardly mattered. The words wove together into a single roar that drove Arya forward. She saw Walder Frey now, still hunched on his high seat like a horrid, shrunken spider. His sons pressed around him, blades drawn, eyes flicking desperately from the battle below to the archers firing through the high windows from without. For the first time, true fear had cracked the old man's face. His mouth worked as he snapped orders that no one seemed to be able to carry out. Good, Arya thought. Let him feel it. The high end of the hall had become a killing ground unto itself. Robb stood near the base of the dais, gray wind at his side, the floor before them slick with blood. Several of Walder's nearer kin already lay sprawled there, their pale Frey faces slack in death. Others hung back, pressed between the fear of their lord's shrill commands and the very present reality of northern steel. Catelyn moved along the edge of the dais like a storm cloud, her gown smeared with blood, her hair half loosed from its pins. The dagger in her hand flashed, darting out to open an artery here, a tendon there. She fought with none of Brienne's brutal grace nor Arya's darting swiftness, but with a sort of grim efficiency, every strike aimed where it would do the most harm with the least wasted motion. Mad, Walder was muttering as she approached. All mad. Should have let the lions do their work in the south and sat here counting tolls. Mad to trust northerners, mad to trust anyone. On that, Catelyn said, stepping over a dead Frey boy no older than Bran. We can agree. He stared at her. For a moment his gaze flicked past her, as if seeking escape. There was none. Bolton was dead. The nearest door to a side passage was blocked by a knot of grappling men. You dare. His voice scraped the air like rust. You dare raise your hand in my hall, after all the insult your get has given me? Catelyn's smile was thin as a blade. I dare a great many things, Lord Walder, she said. I dared to bring my son into this world. I dared to watch my husband die for honor. I dared to walk into your hall knowing you meant to spill our blood on your floor. Her eyes were very bright. Now I dare to live. From the other side of the dais, Arya scrambled up the steps, slipping a little in the blood. A Frey lunged at her, sword raised, but she ducked under his arm and drove needle into his kidney. He grunted, staggered, and fell onto the steps, clutching his side. Mother, she called. Catelyn's head snapped toward her, eyes widening. "Arya, stay back." "I won't," Arya hissed. "Not from this." Walder Frey's gaze flicked between them, taking in the symmetry of it. Mother and daughter closing in from either side, a ring of northern men tightening below. His own kin falling like barley before a scythe. For the first time, true understanding seemed to settle behind his beady eyes. "This was a trap," he said slowly. "You knew. The girl." His face contorted. "Lords of light and dark. You listened to a child's gossip and set it against me? A child who survived your friend's wars," Catelyn said. "Who ran through lands you helped burn. Whose father you helped betray by standing aside. There's wisdom in the mouths of children if you bother to listen, Lord Walder." He bared his teeth. "I'll see you all cursed," he spat. "Every one of you. The Freys have held this crossing since before your line crawled out of the mud. You think you can come into my hall and spill my blood and go unpunished?" Arya's fingers tightened on needle. "You were going to kill my brother," she said. "You were going to kill our men while they slept, drunk and unarmed. You made your own curse." He looked at her properly then, really looked. "You," he said, "you're the whelp, the little wolf. You came in with the servants. I should have had you gutted the moment." He never finished the sentence. A sword emerged from his chest, the point blossoming out between his ribs like a terrible, shining flower. He stared down at it, eyes bulging, then twisted as if trying to see the hand that held it. It was not Arya's, not Catelyn's, it was Robb's. He had mounted the dais unseen while Walder ranted, moving in the blind spot of the old man's rage. Now he stood behind the high seat, his sword buried in the narrow, bony chest. Blood seeped around the blade, darkening the old man's furs. "For the north," Robb said quietly, close to Walder's ear. "For our dead," Catelyn added. "For everyone you ever laughed at," Arya whispered. Walder's mouth worked. No words came. His head lolled forward. Robb pulled the sword free and stepped back, letting the body slump sideways on the high seat, then slide down to the blood-wet floor. For a heartbeat, there was a strange quiet around them, a small bubble of stillness amid the chaos. Then the hall's roar rushed back in, as if that one death had been a brief pause in a longer song. Once Walder fell, the heart went out of the Frey resistance. Not all at once. Vengeance and fear can make men fight longer than sense would, but in patches like rot spreading through old wood. Some threw down their arms and begged for quarter, shouting that they had not known, that they were only following orders. Others tried to flee the hall, racing for doors and side passages, only to find northern shields barring their way. A few fought on with a kind of hopeless fury, hacking and biting even as they bled. Robb wasted no time gloating over the corpse at his feet. He wiped his sword once on Walder's fur-lined cloak, then turned to the hall, raising the blade high. "Frey men!" he shouted. His voice, hoarse from battle, still cut through the din. "Those who throw down their arms now and yield will be judged for their deeds. Those who lift steel against us will die where they stand. Choose quickly." For a moment, there was only the sound of labored breathing, of crackling flames, of the occasional groan. Then a clatter as one sword fell to the floor, then another. A young Frey near the musician's platform tore off his house's cloak and dropped it in the blood. Hands lifted. "I yield," he said, voice shaking. "I never loosed a bolt. I swear it." "Lies," someone growled, moving toward him. "Enough," Robb snapped. "He'll have his chance to prove it. Bind the ones who kneel. Kill only those who won't." The order spread, carried by sergeants and captains, by northern lords whose voices their men knew. The battle's pitch shifted, the killing strokes fewer as swords were turned to disarming cuts, as men stepped back from killing blows to accept surrender. It was not neat. It was not clean. Some Freys tried to lung back up with hidden knives, earning themselves swift ends. Others took advantage of the moment to slip into the press and make for the doors. Those who reached the courtyard found little better there. Northern archers had taken firm control of the yard's approaches, their arrows thinning any attempt at organized resistance. The few Frey men who tried to mount horses found their beasts panicking at the smell of blood, rearing and screaming, throwing riders into the snow. Banners toppled. A tall Heartman hacked at the nearest Frey standard with a sword until it tore free of its pole, the twin tower's sigil crumpling as it hit the ground. He spat on it for good measure. "Get it up!" shouted another, tossing him a folded square of cloth. The man caught it, shook it out. The dire wolf of Stark unfurled, gray on white, edges dark where blood speckles had already touched it. He hauled it up the pole, muscles straining, until it snapped in the cold wind where the Frey colors had flown moments before. Across the yard, another banner came down, replaced by the leaping trout of Tully. On the bridge itself, men fought for control of the gatehouse, the clash of steel echoing between the towers. Arya watched briefly from the hall's doorway, chest heaving, needle still in her hand. Snow fell thicker now, flakes melting as they touched the warm stones near the hall, lingering longer on the colder surfaces of the outer yard. They settled on helms and shoulders, on the fur of gray wind as he paced the threshold, ears pricked for any further threat. "Stay," Robb told the dire wolf, and the beast actually obeyed, though his eyes flashed with impatience. Inside the hall, wounded men were being dragged to the sides, propped against walls or laid out on the tables that had not been overturned. A makeshift triage sprang up under Catelyn's direction. Maesters and leeches summoned from both camps to tend friend and foe alike where they could. "They'll bleed to death if we leave them," she said when a northern lord objected to healing Frey wounds. "Men are not banners. We need witnesses to what was planned here, not corpses that can tell no tales." Arya wandered through it all like a ghost, the ringing in her ears slowly fading. The men she had killed lay where they had fallen, faces already slackening. She stared down at one, trying to feel something like triumph, or horror, or guilt. All she felt was tired. "Here," someone said. A hand pressed a cloth into hers. She looked up to see Robb watching her, blood drying on his face in rusty streaks. "You're dripping," he mimed, wiping his cheek. She touched her own face and found it sticky, the blood of the man from the doorway drying hot and tight on her skin. She wiped at it with the cloth, the red smearing, thinning. "You fought well," he said quietly. "Syrio would have been proud." "He's dead," she replied. "I know." His gaze was steady. "But that doesn't mean he wouldn't be proud." She didn't know what to say to that, so she only nodded, squeezing the cloth in her hand until her knuckles whitened. By the time the last cries had faded and the last surrendered Frey was bound or dead, the torches in the hall had burned low. The air inside was thick and foul, even with doors thrown open to the night. The snow that had drifted in through those doors melted quickly on the warm stones, turning mixed blood and mud into a dark, viscous slurry. They worked through the night. Men who had spent the day marching and the evening fighting spent the small hours carrying bodies, tending wounds, reinforcing gates. There was too much to do and too few to do it. War had a way of thinning even the largest hosts. Arya snatched what rest she could, catnapping in corners, waking at every shout. Dreams came in red flashes when she closed her eyes, Walder's body slumping, Roose's pale gaze, the flare of the burning curtain. She pushed them aside when she rose, shoving her feet back into damp boots, seeking something to put her hands to. Just before dawn, a gray light began to grow in the eastern sky, soft and tentative. The mist on the river took it like a gift, turning pale gold as it curled around the stone legs of the bridge. The towers loomed above, their harsh lines softened by the new banners that snapped in the faint breeze. Stark, Tully, no twin towers, not anymore. Robb stood at the midpoint of the bridge, cloak pulled tight against the chill, his breath fogging in slow clouds. Catelyn stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Arya joined them without a word, leaning her elbows on the low wall that overlooked the water. Below, the river ran black and silent, its surface broken here and there by chunks of ice. The current did not care who held the crossings above. It had flowed before the Freys built their stones and would flow long after some other banners flew there. "It's ugly," Arya said after a time, "even with our flags on it." Catelyn's lips twitched. "Some places are ugly because of what is built there," she said. "Some are ugly because of what is done there. Perhaps, in time, with enough better memories, this crossing will lose some of its ugliness. Or it will always stink of Freys," Arya muttered. Robb huffed a breath that might have been a laugh. "We'll see to that," he said. "The Frey name will answer for this. Not just Walder's line. Each man will be judged by what he knew, what he did, what he tried to do. Some of them may yet prove useful." "And Bolton?" Arya asked. Robb's face hardened. "Bolton is dead," he said simply. "His line will be considered. Those who stand apart from his treachery may find a path back to honor. Those who do not," he shook his head. "The North has had enough flayed men." Snowflakes drifted down lazily, catching in Arya's hair, melting on her cheeks. She watched them fall into the river, vanish without a trace. "What now?" she asked. "Now?" Robb exhaled, the sound nearly a sigh. "Now we hold this place. We send ravens to every corner of the realm with the truth of what happened here. We show them the Lannisters' hand in this attempt and how it failed. And then, Catelyn prompted softly. "We march," he said. "South eventually, or north, if the tales Arya has brought of dead things beyond the wall grow sharper teeth. The war for the throne goes on, but it's no longer just about crowns and songs. It's about whether there'll be a realm left to rule when winter truly comes." Arya thought of the stories she had heard from the Night's Watchmen on the road, of cold things with blue eyes stalking the forests, of corpses that did not stay down. She thought of Jon, somewhere far to the north, his face half forgotten and yet as clear as yesterday. "I heard them talk in the Riverlands," she said, "about dead men walking, about things in the woods. They laughed, most of them, but the ones who had seen something—" She shivered, and not from the cold. "They didn't laugh." Robb nodded slowly. "Then we will have to be ready for both kinds of war," he said. "The kind with men and the kind with other things." He looked down at her, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "And we'll need all our wolves." "Good," Arya said, "because I'm not going anywhere." Catelyn's hand tightened briefly on each of their arms. "For now," she said, "we take this moment. You are both alive. We have survived what should have been our death. Give thanks, if not to gods, then to the stubbornness in our own blood." Arya wasn't sure she had any thanks left in her. But as she stood on the bridge between two towers that had nearly become her family's tomb, watching the sun struggle up over a stained horizon, she felt something loosen inside her. Not forgiveness, not peace, something like space. Space for the next fight, for the next road, for the next choice. The pack had survived the red wedding that had almost been. The song had changed. The wolves had bitten back. Whatever came next, Arya Stark thought, standing between her mother and her brother as their banners snapped above, she would make sure no one ever forgot it.